presentation of Financial Crisis Recovery.
Foreclosure, short sales, bankruptcy, credit card debt, job loss, depreciating home values, money management. Peace of mind when it comes to your finances seems completely out of reach under current conditions, but there is a way to achieve it. For the next 60 minutes, you're going to find out how to cover your assets. Cover your assets.
Dollars that are in default, it's the dollars that they're no longer able to lend to generate revenue for the bank to make that bank go from an unhealthy bank to a healthy bank. So they are inclined to negotiate for percentages. But you know, you've got an interesting thing. You're at battle potentially with your bank as a result of that. On the other hand, you also have to make them a bit of an ally in so much as you have to give them a story that they can justify why they had to negotiate. At the same time, those same things have to go on. And when the story is that, look, this customer, this consumer can file bankruptcy tomorrow if they want to, it justifies why the bank can go to the FDIC or the examiner, who may be ultimately making some of these decisions, and say, look, we have to negotiate on this one, otherwise we're going to get nothing. And the bank is inclined to do it at that point. That's really what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it's fabulous. I find this information to be just absolutely intriguing. It's a big part of my business, but it's something that I have enjoyed and is so much a part of everything that we do day by day. So we're going to come back. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more with Tom about estate planning, how we can protect assets, how we can do good estate planning, and how we can help transfer those assets from one generation to the next, which ultimately may come down to a lot of influence from the tax code and how you do estate planning. So I want to encourage you to go to CYA21.com, download the Financial Crisis Bible to enhance your financial vocabulary, to give you a basis of understanding. So when you see somebody like me, or you come to see Tom, or you talk with your financial advisor or your CPA, you've got a good understanding, a good basis of understanding, so you can have more productive conversations with those professionals. We'll take our break, and we'll be back talking more about estate planning and asset protection with attorney Tom Fafinski with Virtus Law. Welcome back to Cover Your Assets, the show that talks about everything you need to know if you're in a financial crisis or want to ensure that you never are, which is probably the most pointed issue that we're discussing today. Make sure that you never are. Tom, nobody ever worries about a financial crisis. Nobody ever expects that they're going to have any problems, and of course, until they do. And for our mutual clients, our goal is to get them in to see you and I long before they get into this financially challenged position. But the problem is nobody seems to worry about these things until something goes wrong. And at that point, it's a whole lot tougher to position yourself to attempt to protect your assets in the face of creditor actions and pressures.
That's that spectrum. The closer it gets to if you have a lawsuit served against you, you're closer to transactions being black than you are to white. And so if they start early, and we're close to lily white in terms of creditors pursuing you, under UFTA, where the transactions will be far more enforceable. That's one of the reasons why I love working with your clients, Todd, is oftentimes your clients come to me and they are current on their obligations. Their credit score hasn't been affected, and they are saying, okay, I might see a little bit of trouble here coming. We are far closer to white in those types of scenarios than we are to the black transactions.
Because once a person begins to default, every move they make from there on out goes under a microscope. If we wind up in court, you can bet your rear end that any moves that you made after the date you began to default are going to be looked at very carefully.
They are, and they're going to look at them not and say, well, automatically those transactions. So there might be a valid reason for doing those transactions still, but like for instance, this in 2012, we have the ability to give $5 million of assets under the current estate tax laws, and your spouse could give $5 million of assets too. So we're never going to see this again. Right. In 2013, it reverts all the way back to the $1 million.
I was just going to say that.
And so you can still engage in that transaction even if you're having problems. And if a judge says, "Well, would you do that?" You've got a great reason for why you did it, and it's not that it's going to for sure clear the hurdles of the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, but it's a good start.
And there's by the way, for those of you listening to that who are business owners who have significant assets that are in the multiple $1 million digits, you need to be aware that there is enormous pressure to change that tax structure that currently is very friendly for the transfer of assets from one generation to the next that may very well not exist come 2013. So those are things that you want to jump on very quickly. So we have talked extensively about estate planning and asset protection for the individual. However, there is an entirely different set of conversations to be had with respect to business owners and some of the unique considerations and conversations that must be had as a result for estate planning and business protection. So, Tom, why don't you talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you can use to transfer an asset, protect an asset like a business?
Sure. So when a business comes in and it's a small business, a lot of times what happens is that it's a combination of multiple enterprises. They may have, they certainly will have a brand, and that's an asset. They will have equipment, and that's an asset. They might be a services-based organization, so the equipment isn't really integral to the business itself. It just allows them to be more efficient in the business. And so, oftentimes what you got to look at is, okay, are we mixing a bunch of businesses? So if we are, let's start breaking them apart. So one real very basic asset protection technique when you form a company, right at the beginning, right before, when you're lily white, right before there's creditors involved or sometimes we call them predators, people that are making claims against you that aren't warranted.
No pun against the bankers.
And actually not just, we're talking about, sexual harassment claims, discrimination claims, slip and falls. There's a lot of folks out there that are interested in pursuing a healthy business. So before any of that happens, let's say my company's name is Todd Rooker, Inc. So instead of being Todd Rooker, Inc. and having the corporation be named Todd Rooker, Inc., how about if we take Todd Rooker, Inc. and spin it off into a separate company and license it to the operating company? And then that way, 2 years later, if something happens and somebody's pursuing the assets of ABC Company, which is doing business as Todd Rooker, Inc., and let's say it's warranted and they get all the assets, but they don't get Todd Rooker, Inc. Now you could start a new company called DEF Company and license the name Todd Rooker, Inc. And there's from the public standpoint, a seamless transition to the new company, and you've protected that brand that you've spent so much time on. So when you are an employee of a company, when you're an employee of 3M and you work in the accounting department, are you really there to protect the brand of 3M? Probably not.
Probably not.
So if you're working for ABC Co., you're not necessarily doing the work of a consultant or whatever for the creation of value in that brand. That's what you're doing as an investor. So why not spin it off into a separate company?
And the interesting thing about what you're describing, and I'm going to come back and just restate this and make sure that everybody is brought along in this conversation and this understanding. But the interesting thing is when you go to get loans, rarely does anybody even ask you for these particular things that we're talking about. So an example where this would be valuable would be someone has a business guarantee they've got a loan and they have signed the business as a guarantor, which means that everything that is owned and titled in the name of that business, if you default on that loan, all becomes the property potentially of the creditor who's now collateralized against all of the ownership assets of that business. Well, a lot of times business owners are really great for doing this. They will stop paying certain creditors and they will liquidate certain assets and pay one creditor and not the others. Or better yet, they'll give themselves money, which may very well be considered enrichment of yourself at the expense of your creditors by taking an asset that once you default on that loan should be used to pay your creditor, but in fact you're using it to pay other creditors to be able to complete a job or to be able to pay yourself. And oh man, do we got problems. Now the interesting thing, had you actually taken that and put it into an entirely separate entity, yet it never had that problem, then the irony is the bank probably wouldn't have even asked you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Todd, because we can take that to the next level and say, all right, so your investment in this business is $500,000. So as an investor in a business, this is what you get. You're last in line. Everybody is before you, and if there's anything left over, you get your money. So the first position lender, ordinarily a bank that's doing a line of credit or something like that, employees that have claims against you, customers that have claims against you, and guess what? You're at the end of the line, and if there's nothing there, you don't get anything. So, but you got $500,000, say, in this business. There's nothing that stops you from the beginning. Not one thing that stops you from saying, okay, bank, you can have the first position. I'll take the second. And now, in the second position, I'm a secured creditor. And I go file it at the Secretary of State. The whole world is on notice. And so your investment of $500 is really a loan of $500, and now you've jumped to the second in line.
Which means that anybody who comes thereafter is in a compromised position because there's two people in the food line before they get there, and if there's nothing in terms of assets that goes beyond what the two secured creditors have, well, they're not going to get any money, and legal action is a waste of time.
Absolutely, and you did it when it was lily white. You did it in the beginning of the entity formation. If you don't have a lender, you're first in line. And there's nothing that the law will do to protect other people.
But you got to do it in advance.
In advance.
You got to do it in advance, and that's the whole point. You got to do it on purpose. You got to do it in advance for all to see at a point where you don't have any problems.
So why don't people do it, Todd? They're working on their offense. They are saying, you know what? I want to score. I want to score. I want to score.
Money.
I want to make money. And you know, look at the Vikings and you say, okay, if the Vikings scored 56 points on a Sunday, hey, is that great? I don't know. Did the defense give up 57? Because if they gave up 57, it's not so good. Ordinarily, 56 is pretty good. That's what we saw in the last 4 years. Is we saw people doing great jobs on building their offense, millions and millions of dollars of equity in their business and stuff. We don't know if that was enough, though. And then it turns out it wasn't.
And nothing's ever going to go wrong until it does.
Until it does.
And
then it's too late.
And it is prudent planning.
Not completely too late. I shouldn't like brand it, because what happens is that just becomes examined closely.
We have come to the end of our road here today, and I'm so sorry because we could go on and on, Tom, and I know that. I want to encourage all of you to go to the website CYA21.com, download the Financial Crisis Bible. I also want you to check out Tom Fafinski that you can find at the CYA21 website, CYA21.com, and go to Virtus Law Tom Fafinski. It has been our pleasure and honor to have him on the show. Look forward to hearing you next week on Cover Your Assets.
The proceeding was a paid program. The views expressed are not necessarily